the biblical end times. You know, the apocalypse. But here's a wild thought. What if the end already happened? Let's get into it.
We've all heard this kind of language. It's epic, it's terrifying, and for centuries, it's been the fuel for countless predictions about the end of the world. The story we're always told is that this is a sneak peek into our future. But what if we've been reading the map completely upside down? What if this isn't a crystal ball at all, but more of a rear-view mirror? That right there, that's the central mystery we're going to solve. And to do it, we have to become historical detectives and jump in our time machine. Destination nearly 2,000 years ago.
We're headed to 1st century Judea, a province simmering under Roman occupation. And, to say it was a powder keg waiting for a spark is a massive understatement. The air was just thick with tension, with rebellion, and this desperate, desperate hope that God would step in and save the day.
Just look at this timeline. You can see the pressure building year after year. This wasn't some sudden snap. It was a century-long slow burn. You've got the Roman conquest, then decades of brutal crackdowns and uprisings. The final straw, a Roman governor, Gessius Florus, marches into the Holy Temple itself and just loots the treasury. That was it. The whole country exploded.
Now, at the very heart of this firestorm were these extremist groups, like the Zealots and the even more radical Sicarii. For these guys, this wasn't just a political squabble. It was a holy war. They were true fundamentalists who believed that any compromise, any peace talk with Rome was a disgusting betrayal of God. And this twisted ideology meant they weren't just fighting Romans. They were actively terrorizing their own people.
And get this quote from the historian Flavius Josephus, who saw it all firsthand. He says the fanatics became so vicious, so barbaric, that it was actually better to be captured by the Romans than to be trapped in the city with your own countrymen. That's how toxic religious zealotry had become. This is the world the New Testament was born into. Okay, so how on earth does all this history connect back to prophecy? Well, to figure that out, we have to understand what we're actually reading. A book like Revelation isn't a modern newspaper. It was written in a very specific, coded style.
It's a genre called apocalyptic literature. Now, the word apocalypse doesn't actually mean end of the world. It means an unveiling. Think of these texts as a kind of secret code, full of wild symbols and visions, written for a specific group of people who were suffering to tell them about the catastrophic events happening right then in their own lifetime.
So, over the years, people have tried to crack this code in 4 main ways. The futurist view, that's the one you see in movies, says it's all still going to happen. The historicist thinks it's a map of all of history. The idealist says, it's just a big metaphor for good versus evil. But then there's this 4th view, preterism, that most of these prophecies already came true, way back in the 1st century.
So, this is actually pretty simple. When the Bible talks about the end of the age, it doesn't mean the end of the planet. It means the end of an era, specifically the end of the entire world of ancient Judaism that revolved around the temple in Jerusalem, a world that came to a fiery, bloody end in the year 70 CE.
And this makes total sense when you think about it. The original audience wasn't thinking thousands of years into the future. The texts themselves show that the very first Christians were convinced the end was right around the corner.
So what really happened in 70 CE? What was this historical apocalypse? This event so catastrophic that it could be described with language like the sun going black and the moon turning to blood. Let's take a look at the Roman siege of Jerusalem. Outside the city walls, you have the most efficient killing machine of the ancient world, the Roman army, just systematically choking the life out of the city. But inside the walls, total chaos. The Zealot factions had turned on each other in a vicious civil war. They were murdering anyone who even whispered about surrender. They even burned the city's own food supplies to force a fight to the death. It was pure madness.
The reality inside that city, as recorded by eyewitnesses, is almost too horrifying to imagine. The famine got so bad, people turned to cannibalism. The streets were literally filled with bodies. If you tried to escape, the Romans would crucify you on the hills overlooking the walls, sometimes 500 people a day. It was, and this is not an exaggeration, hell on earth.
According to the historian Josephus, that's the number of people who died. 1.1 million dead in less than 5 months. This wasn't some symbolic prophecy. This was a real, historical, honest-to-God apocalypse.
And then came the final, soul-crushing blow. The Romans stormed the Temple Mount, and the magnificent temple, the very center of the Jewish universe, was set on fire and burned until nothing was left but rubble. For the people of that time, this was it. This was the sun falling out of the sky.
And we don't have to take anyone's word for it. We have proof. You can go to Rome right now and see the Arch of Titus. It's a victory monument. And carved right into the stone, you see Roman soldiers parading through the streets, holding the spoils of war, including the giant golden menorah from the temple. It's a permanent, stone-carved receipt for this world-shattering event.
So now we have the history, we have the reality of what happened. Let's put it right next to that symbolic, prophetic language and see if the code suddenly makes a whole lot of sense. All of a sudden, when you look at it through the lens of 70 CE, the code just snaps into focus. It's not a mystery anymore. It's poetry describing history. What does it mean for the sun to go black? Well, it means the sky is choked with so much smoke from a burning city that you can't see the sun. The moon turning to blood? Imagine the horrifying red glow it would have reflecting a city engulfed in flames. Souls under the altar crying out? That's the thousands of priests and defenders butchered in the temple courtyard. A great earthquake? Can you imagine the sound, the ground-shaking tremor when that massive stone temple finally collapsed? The prophecy wasn't predicting the future. It was describing a present horror.
And the aftermath? It truly was the end of a world. Judaism was completely remade. Without the temple, the entire sacrificial system ended. The priestly class? Gone. In its place, rabbinic Judaism rose up, focusing on scripture and prayer, which is what allowed the Jewish faith to survive. And it also created the space for Christianity to really separate and become its own distinct religion. This one event changed everything.
And that really is the biggest takeaway here. When you understand the history, the text transforms. It stops being some spooky, mysterious blueprint for the future, and it becomes a gut-wrenching, powerful human story about our past.